Hello and welcome to the It's Your Effin' Journey podcast. My name is Melissa McQueenie, and I am basically the combination of a licensed professional counselor and a life coach. If a life coach and a counselor had a baby, you would get me. And I am the host of the It's Your Effin' Journey podcast. Today is an exciting day. I have received so much good feedback from you guys about part one with Juliette Cole, all about adoption. And I'm so happy to present the second part of the interview with her. So many good tidbits and takeaways and tips. And I just appreciate her so much for being on here. And we have already talked about having another discussion in the upcoming months or weeks because there was topics that we just didn't even cover that I would love to touch upon with her. So without further ado, what time is it? Podcast time. It's a celebration. What time is it? Podcast time. Enjoy the episode.
And Case does, not only do they do it for adoptees, but they do it for adoptive parents, they do it for professionals, and the amount of trainings that I've taken between both of them is just amazing. And it's just I really do think that it's helped me become a better clinician and a better mom, you
Yeah.
know, to truly understand, like,
So
and
you
to
were
get
doing you were doing
care
all these trainings as a adoptive mom in the foster system or because of your job as a clinician
because of
or
my
both?
job.
Okay. And then
Because of my job.
so another question. So you were at while all this was happening, you were at the group home. Was this like when you started realizing like this is what you want to move into for your private practice or were you not even there yet?
Yes. Yeah. So while I was working the group home, I was there for 3.5 years, and I was like, this is where I want to be. Because the group home was for teenage boys that were in foster care, um, or who needed a higher level of care, or who were voluntarily placed, whether they were adopted or in their home, and then they were voluntarily placed into the group home for a higher level of care and supports based on their needs.
Wow. So your life is adoption.
My life is adoption.
And like you just have, I mean, that's why I don't want to go back to the diaper thing because I'll cry again, but like you just have the biggest heart. Like you had the biggest heart when I met you at CRT before all of this because I met you, well, we don't know about the timeline, but maybe she was with you, maybe she wasn't when I first met you, but I mean, I think when you are in this therapy world, you tend to meet good people, right? We've met some not so nice people too, but you know, you are one of the good ones. So I love this whole story about this. So okay, continue. So now you've got the baby. The baby is has other needs, right? Other needs.
Yeah, he ended up with asthma. He ended up again with the same genetic condition that his sister has. Um,
Okay.
but I think some of the when thinking about it, like, I was told, like, oh, this is what would happen to her when she was younger, and I'm like, that's the same thing. I wonder if that was what that was, because she wasn't with me at that time. Um, like, they both have loose muscle tone. They both have, um, ear infections. He ended up needing tubes. She ended up not needing tubes. They both, which are all, so some of these things are because of the genetic condition.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just like, that's probably what it was starting off. Um, and so when I started going to all these different doctors for her, and then, like, when he was getting a little older and they were like, oh, we want you to do this, I was like, I need him tested. I need him tested for this genetic condition, which I won't even get into that story because it took freaking 6 years to get him tested for this genetic condition,
My
which shouldn't have
God.
taken long. And it wasn't that he wasn't tested. He was tested. The results took 6 years, which should not have taken that long by
Yeah.
any means. It's only a 6-week test. But I won't digress into that. You can't make the shit up that happened with
No.
with his. Um, but I think that when coming out of it, it's more of, how do you get families, right? to understand how much work that goes into it, you know, and it's hard. It is
Yeah.
the hardest journey that I have been on, um, out of anything, you know,
What's the
because
hardest? Is it like is it like what where is the biggest challenge for you in
holding
terms of
space,
what is it?
holding the space for
Yeah.
all the emotions. Because it's, again, so when thinking about, and I'm going to go back to your comment where it was like when I was a teen and I was having this and, um, you know these angers and all this stuff going on, I think to my Mira, she's 13 now, but when she was younger, I'm very open and honest with my kids about what their journey is and everything else, and I've given them their documents and said, here, you are in charge of this is your stuff. I've reviewed it many a time, so I can tell you exactly what's in it and without even looking at it. But just recently I gave it to her. um but a couple years ago, I want to say it was 2021. So it was a that time was very hard because my grandmother was sick. My uncle was in the hospital. So they were both dying, and then they had both passed right after this visit. Um, but in that, Mira asked to have a visit with her birth mom, which I supported absolutely. But I was angry. I was angry with it wasn't that I was angry with her. By no means I was angry with her, and I want to make that very clear. It was more of the feeling for me was was I enough for her? Was I doing enough for her? And I know that that's not the piece. And I had to struggle. And so even though I talk about this all the time, I still went through that emotion. I still went through that challenge. And and she would ask me, like, will you help me write down the questions that I want to ask? Will you help me do this? And I was like, absolutely. And I would sit there and I would go with her and I would be there with her. And I was like, what is it that you want her to know? Or what is it that you want to know? And, how do we write this down? And da 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 da. Um, and then I would go to my room and I would cry. And my husband was great, and he was just my rock through all of it, because again, even though I knew it had nothing to do with me, I did feel it. And
Yeah.
so holding that space of like, how do I hold that space for her to explore this relationship and go deeper in with her while also having my own feelings. And so that visit came, and again, we made a safety plan, about what would happen as she felt so overwhelmed and as she was, you know, feeling whatever. Because her birth mom can be a lot, and I know that, and I love her birth mom. I'm so appreciative of her mom. Um, and but she can be a lot. She's a lot for me sometimes. Um, and but also knowing that she wanted so much to have this relationship with her, and me knowing the other side, because the termination was already done by the time I met Mira. There wasn't an open adoption plan in place for her. That didn't stop me from having an open adoption. um there was an open adoption put in place for JJ, with their mom. And to know that I've never given you the space of not being able to reach out and not being able to talk and not being able to ask questions or anything, and to know that their mom only asked about him, and Mira wanted so much to have this relationship with her, and Mira would ask me many a times and be like, have you heard from her? And I would say yes. And so I would answer the questions that she asked without making her feel worse about it.
Yeah.
Because she would be like, oh, did she wish me a happy birthday? And
Oh my God.
I'm like, oh, I heard from her, and so like I would manipulate the questions, not manipulate them. I don't want to say manipulate them, but she always messages me on JJ's birthday because they're 5 years and 3 days apart. So she'll always message me on JJ's birthday and be like, tell the kids I said happy birthday, you know. So it's like you remember his birthday, but you don't remember her birthday, you know. And she would reach out and be like, how's JJ doing? And it's like the kids are doing great. Mira's doing this and JJ's doing this. And then she's like, oh yeah, what's Mira doing? So it's like that piece. And so to know that Mira is like dying for this relationship with someone that doesn't feel like is dying to have that same relationship or information, that was the hard part. And so we end up going to this lunch, and I don't know, like, and maybe the therapist in me or the mom in me or what, I don't know. Um, but their mom has a substance use history, and she mirrors at the lunch table, and we went to Chili's. It wasn't like it was a significant place or anything. And she's how old was she at this point? It was 3 years ago. She was 10. And she goes, are you okay? Are you going to be okay sitting here? Because the bar is right there. And I know you have a problem with substances. And I'm like, oh, like at 10, to have this understanding of who they are and what they're struggling with. And, you know, and then we ended up having another visit last year. And her foster mom came to that one, and because she wants to know more about who she was as a baby. Um, and was upset, and I think that was more the space where she Mira truly understood just how much information she was going to be able to get from her birth mom, you know, because she would ask questions and she didn't have answers, and she was so angry the next day. um and her foster mom was able to answer questions. um but she came home the next day and she was just so angry. And the other thing was is that she had said to me, as she's destroying her room, and I think that's the space is I also need you not to be destructive,
Yeah.
while I
Yeah.
hold that space for you, knowing that you are struggling,
Yeah.
you know. But she's destroying her room, and she ended up coming out, and she was just like, how come she kept saying, when am I going to call her mom? She's not my mom. Yes, she gave birth to me, but that's not who she is. And she's forcing me to do that. And I don't want to. And I said, you don't have to. Um, and so then later on, she curled up with me on the couch and she just sat down. And Mira's my biggest struggle as a kid, right? She's my biggest challenge. And she's the one that I'm gonna get the award for best mom for. Um, and she sat down and she just like, thank you for loving me the way you do. And and she's like, I'm sad she couldn't love me the way you do. And it broke me. And when my kids see me cry all the time. I'm a mess. I cry all the time.
It's a
Um,
therapist thing, right?
yeah, right. JJ thinks I cry all the time because grandma died. And he's like, are you sad because grandma died? No, I'm sad because I bumped my foot on the table and it hurt, and like I'm crying because of the pain. But he's like, you're crying because grandma died. Um, so you know what I mean? It's that space, and to hear that from her. And I think that that moment probably pivoted. I think for so long she lived in her ghost kingdom, um and then kind of being 12 and understanding the dynamics of the relationships. Um,
Well, and our
so
kids are so amazing, right? Like with their understanding and I feel like as, as a therapist, I'll put my therapist hat on for a minute. Like, we don't give them enough credit, or oftentimes people don't give them enough credit. Like, what they see, what they experience, what their feelings are, and they are so amazing and so resilient, right? But I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this statement, but I don't know. Um, you are amazing for that space that you hold for them because and I know like adoption has come such a long way, but coming from a closed adoption, I didn't have that space. And I didn't I wasn't allowed to have my own emotions about it. It felt it was a very early lesson in my adoption was that my mom's emotions were the um my adoptive mom's who is my mom is her emotions took precedence over everything. And right or wrong, I'm not here to judge her experience, but it I didn't have that space. I didn't have that it was just it was not allowed. So like to hear those conversations is so powerful. And it's amazing what you've done, what you've given them, what you've given all the people that you work with and your own kids and family. And the moms that you are able like that, and that's a reflection of who you are, the work you've done, the work you do, and it's amazing. It's just so amazing.
thank you.
God. I knew I would get emotional, but I'm like, what is happening today?
Yeah. I think just the space of like truly understanding, if I can give anybody anything, is just always imagine how you would feel. How you would feel. And this is something that Lori had actually said when in grad school. It was like you have to learn to speak to them with the information that you have at their age, you know. So think back to when you were this was a scenario that you gave. Think back to when you were first in love, and when you were how old were you? And what did you need to hear? And what did you want to hear? And then what did you hear? And then speak to that.
Yeah.
So I I do, and I hear that all the time, and I feel that with my kids all the time. And it's like I know how much pain and heartache and suffering that being separated and feeling all these different feelings and emotions, and you know it's just it's I can't even imagine even being through it, exactly what they're going through.
Yeah.
Because it's different. As similar as it is, it's different because
Yeah.
I was there. And I lived with my birth mom until I was 16 for the most part. There was a 2-year period that I wasn't, but for the most part 16. And as toxic and dysfunctional and abusive as it was, I was still there. I was still there. The and I craved for attention and affection. And you know even now, like trying to crave for all that attention and affection, I'm still working through that, and I'm
Yeah.
42. You
I
know,
know. I know.
it
It's
it,
ongoing. It's
it is,
ongoing.
and
I
I
I
think
I
that's
had a
the
wild
space.
experience this year. So I met my biological mother when I was 18, and and it wasn't even like a very intentional thing. I filled out a registry in the back of a magazine. We were matched, and all of a sudden she was in my life. Like it just was very, and that is, I'm very grateful for that. I know a lot of people don't have that experience, so I'm very grateful for it. But it was also really overwhelming. And all of a sudden, I had her in my life who was full force wanting to be in my life, and then balancing the feelings of my parents, who my mom had a lot of feelings still. And I took on all of that for my whole adulthood, navigating this. It was always when my biological mother would come to visit to Connecticut, I felt like I had to like hide it from my adoptive parents. And then it was so much anxiety and stress that was all put on by myself. And it was wild because this year, I'm 40 fucking 4. And this year, Karen, my biological mother, was coming to visit. And for the first time, I'll never forget it. I was at a soccer game with my mom, my adoptive mom. My biological mother texted me and said, "I'm coming to visit on such and such day." It was the next week. And I all I did was just say to my mom at the game, I'm like, "Oh, Karen's coming to the soccer game next week." You know what? She was like, "Oh, cool." And all of a sudden, 20 fucking years of anxiety and stress, I was like, that was all I had to do, was just say, this is what's happening. She's coming. No one has to be threatened. No one has to have all these feelings. And obviously, like, it's a process. Everything's a process. But I'm like, holy shit. Like, why do we take on all of this and try to, like, navigate these situations when you are just like, let's follow the kids' lead.
Well, and so that's because it's loyalty.
Yeah.
Loyalty, right? Like
Yeah.
we feel like we have to be loyal to our biological parents and to our adopted parents because it's, if I tell you how I feel, my adopted get the stigma. The stigma says you are supposed to be appreciative, you're supposed to be grateful, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be this. And not saying that you are not, but I also have these feelings about this person that I don't know or that I want to know or I knew and I do know, and now I can't have this relationship that I used to have with them. And
Yeah.
you and society are telling me that I'm just supposed to forget it. I can't forget it,
Yeah.
and so it's just and adoption is not a space, and I think that's what the post was, is adoption is not the space of understanding the loss that comes along with it. As a society, we sit there and we push it and we go, you know oh no, it's a good thing that this is there, it's a good thing. And who would say that? Who would say that it's a good thing that you never have your mom anymore?
Yeah.
Because as a death, if this person died, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
That must be really hard. And as adoption, it's like, oh, that's a good thing, you're good, you're good now.
Yeah.
Is who? Because adoption started off in most standpoints, adoption started off in poverty. So to come from that, where I'm not worthy enough of being taken care of because my parents are poor, that I have to be put in somewhere where they're rich and well off or whatever, to be taken care of. I can still receive support and financial, like, commitment and emotional and basic needs, even if my parents are poor.
Yeah.
So to
That's
say I should be,
wild. I never even thought of that. Like that was I never even thought of that.
well, that's if you look at the history, and again, this is all just stuff that I've learned over the years.
Yeah.
Adopt orphan trains. They would ship kids from lower income and migrate them out and migrate them far enough away so that way they couldn't make it back, and then here's a bunch of kids, they need somewhere to go, and then they would migrate them and they would put them in farms and have them work there, and then they became a part of that family. And then for far too long, I mean, the international adoptions were because they were poor and they couldn't financially take, or society had told them that they couldn't have more than one kid or what, because the what's the word I'm thinking of, I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of.
It'll
It
come
just
to you.
you can only have one kid. Like this is our policy, this is our rule, and they would move him along. So then to say that I'm supposed to be grateful for that and I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be thankful for that, like I don't know.
Yeah. It's so complicated. And so do you feel like now, like, is open adoption much more common than the closed adoption?
So uh, yes and no. And so I say yes and no because I think when someone so let me ask you this question. When you think open adoption, what do you think?
I think that you have some level of contact. The biological family or mom has some level of contact with the adopted parents, whatever that is determined. I don't know how that's determined.
So that is the common misconception of an open adoption. Open adoption doesn't always mean that there's contact,
Mm,
right? Open adoption is that there is understanding and conversations about adoption,
mm,
right? So whether that be, right, that you have communication with your biological family, or you don't, it's do you understand your story and your journey? And oftentimes, there won't be that space where you do have that where okay, I'm adopted, but what does that mean?
yeah,
You know, it just means that I get to celebrate this day, on January 23rd because that's what they said is my adoption day. But
yeah,
why am I adopted? What happened? Where am I at? What's going on? Are you having those conversations? And it's so important to have them. And there's age appropriate ways to say your parents were used substances and weren't able to keep you safe.
yeah,
And no, you're not going to say have that same conversation, with a 4-year old that you would with a 16-year-old because their understandings are different. Their emotional security is different. Their emotional intelligence is different. And I think that's the other challenge, where if you have a 15-year-old who developmentally is 12 but emotionally is 4, how do you have those conversations?
yeah.
Because
And
you have
and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always come from the school of thought, at least when it comes to my parenting, because I had so much shielded from me. I just say shit, and if they can, whatever level they can sort of absorb it, we take it at, and then they're able to have the conversations when they can sort of, you know, think about it on a deeper level, or have other questions arise. But I wasn't told I was adopted. I found out from a friend when I was 9, and it was very traumatic to me. So I'm always like, and so I always joke because when I started having kids, they had adoption books. So I'm like, all my kids are going to think they're adopted because I read them all the adoption books because I think it's so amazing that they are there for the kids to absorb however they're able to develop.
so it, problem is, right, is that if I was to have the conversation, so I'm going to go back to my Mira because when she was younger, and I had this conversation with not only her but with Genesis too, about substances, is that because they were young and they took what they thought was medicine to make them feel better. It wasn't medicine and it actually made it worse. Because when we think about substances, why are people taking substances?
Yeah.
Because they think it's going to make them feel better.
Yeah.
And significantly, it usually makes them worse. Their mental health will decline, their physical health will decline, you know, not saying that it will definitely, like it's not always a definite, but in this situation it made it worse, you
Yeah.
know. So Mira, when Mira was 10, you know, this is where this prompted this visit, was she had came out, and yes, you have to change those conversations. You have to be able to update those conversations, because she had came out, and I don't remember what it was or why it came out, but she said, "I wonder if Miss," oh, I said almost broke confidentiality there. "I wonder if my mom, you know, took the same medicine that I took, and will it make mine worse?" And I said, "Oh, baby, no, 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 no. Now we're gonna have a different conversation." Because she held on to that for 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
What she took was called this, you know, and I talked to her about drugs. Because again, now at 10, you're capable of understanding drugs and what that is. And
Yeah.
I need you to have a conversation, because if you're at school and someone's offering you drugs, I need you to understand that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So again, now when we went to the restaurant and she sees a bar, she's now connecting. Well, I know you've had a challenge with drugs and alcohol. Can you sit across from a bar? Are you safe? Because I need you to be safe in order to have this lunch with you. So that's now where she's going,
Yeah.
you know. And Jenny's in the space where, you know, she sits there and she'll say, when she can be safe and she can make safe choices, I'm more than willing to have this relationship with her. But I'm not willing to put myself in an unsafe situation because she wants to have a relationship. And unfortunately, that hasn't even been a conversation. Because Mira has wanted the conversation and Mira's wanted the relationship. I continuously check in with Genesis, um, and you can't tell Jalen anything different. Like he, I've said to him many a times, you know, you came from someone else's belly and you grew in their belly, and you lived with them for a month, and you know they cared for you, and you know, and he's like, "You're my mom." And I'm like, "No, I know." And what you and he was 2 one day, and he grabbed my face and he goes, "You're my mom. I come from you." And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to argue with a 2-year-old right now. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be held hostage here. You know, but we still have those conversations. And he joined us the last time, you know, um, for the visit when we had it. And he said he doesn't want to go back. And that may change,
Yeah.
you know. And I think it's, what is your conversations? What are those conversations? How do you have those conversations? You know, openness isn't just always about visitations. Because if I'm also going to the visits,
And I love that. I love that. I sorry to interrupt you, but I love
no,
like and I hope that that is the direction that adoption is going because I wish that I was trusted with my information or I wish I was I guess, yeah. I wish I was trusted with that knowledge about myself before hearing it from people on the playground and, people around town. It felt really terrible to have other people have a knowledge about me that I didn't have, that I wasn't trusted to have. And I hope every kid has that because it's just so shitty to feel like you're the last to know about your own fucking life.
what does that do for your relationship with your parents? You know, feeling like they've kept a secret from you and they lied to you for all this time.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And that's what left me with so much anger and so much resentment. And, you know, yeah, it's not a good situation. So I think I love that definition of open. Like, your journey, right? And this is your journey. So you should know where you come from.
You are very much entitled to it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. This was amazing. I thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and your heart. And I feel like we could do this for hours.
I absolutely love talking about adoption, and I think that it's like the best thing. And I am always, always, always like, how do I help support? Because it's just knowledge and understanding, and it's not, as much as I love my kids, as much as I love my kids, it's not all about love. That is
Yeah.
not adoption is not all about love. You
Yeah.
cannot just love the problems away. You cannot
Yeah.
just love the issue. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to have understanding, and you have to have knowledge, and you have to have the community and the base for it. And you know, so I will talk for hours about adoption.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing. It's amazing what you do, and I'm sure you're such an awesome resource to the people that you work with. In addition, as I said, to your own kids and family, and you know, and you take care of yourself, right? Like, so you're behind the scenes, like you're doing what you can for your kids and being that support, and also going behind the scenes and crying and saying, holy shit, this is how this is impacting me. And I love that. That's real. I always joke that, like, I always thought when I was little that adults knew what they were doing, and now I know that they don't. And that's what I share with my kids. Like, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have to give, and I'm gonna fuck up. I'm gonna mess up. I'm still gonna be here. I'm still gonna love you, and I love that human approach versus, perfect parents,
Yeah.
because there are none.
No, absolutely not.
And I guess I should always add that because I always like to fucking add that. I don't blame anyone for what they did or didn't do. It's a journey, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful, like, when you fucking posted that thing a couple weeks ago, and I was like, bam, I feel heard. Like, I feel seen. And I think that if I had heard that, what I coulda, shoulda, but if I heard that back then, maybe it would have given me some understanding, of why I was the way that I was, because I was sort of walking through it like, I just have to be grateful. My parents gave me a life. My parents took me in, and I still fight with myself over feeling senses of obligation and all of that. There's so many layers to it, which
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I just love you, and I'm so glad that we did this, and you're in my feed and in my life, and I just appreciate you.
So much. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. This was like, I've been so excited for weeks to do this
I
when
know,
you
I
reached.
know, I know. I love it. Well, thank you, and you have the biggest heart, and we will chat soon.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye. So freaking good. Thank you again, Juliette, for coming on and sharing your heart and sharing your beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you all for listening. If this spoke to you, please share it with a friend, take a screenshot, share it on social media. I would love to get the word out to more people who it could potentially help. I have also wanted to tell, ooh, this is my fancy podcast setup over here, guys. Um, this is how we do it around here at the It's Your Effin' Journey podcast. Perfection goes out the window, and progress. We accept progress. Okay, so I am not opening any life coaching spots this month because just too quick, too short, lots of holiday stuff. But what I am going to do is offer anyone who has worked with me in my life coaching program this year, I want to offer you a session to help get you set up for your goals next year. So it's going to be a 45-minute session, $200, and you have the opportunity to work with me to hone in where you've been, where you want to go, and let's make a plan moving forward. This is just for the people who have worked with me in my life coaching program. So if that is you, I'll put the form in my bio, or just shoot me a message and say, I'm in. I want a session to set myself up for this year. So let me know. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for taking your time to listen to this, because it just means the world to me. So thank you guys, and we'll see you soon. Did I? Is it done?